honor for me to be with you and my co-host, and I'm certainly both of them agree with me that the real heroes were those, unfortunately, that did not return home. It still may be in Korea, and their families who still lost them. But it is good that we are reminded, especially our young people, of the sacrifice other people have made in order to preserve history, but even more importantly, of the struggle that's ahead of us. I can't find the words to tell you how much I appreciate the day that Hannah Kim entered my life in order to be an intern, a press person, ultimately the chief of staff, but more importantly than anything else, to have visited every country that gave their soldiers and put them in harm's way to protect South Korea is something that is unheard of. And I'm certain that is appreciative by those who still believe they fought in a forgotten war. I joined the Army in 1948. I thought I was joining the Army that would never see war again, that World War II ended all wars. I had no idea where Korea was. I had no idea that the United Nations taking a country and divide it in half. I don't even understand today how it's possible that you can take a country with 5,000 years of history that have suffered under the Japanese for so long and just divide it in half. I don't know what motivated North Korea to invade South Korea, or why Russia allowed that to happen in the first place. But what I do know is that it is still not over, and it will not be over until we can have a united Korea, until people in the North and South are brought together and be able to seek liberty and justice and peace as God would have all of us to do. And so as we come together, I just hope that it will be contagious for the young people, especially Korean Americans who are young and have no idea what the South Koreans have gone through in order to make it possible for them to enjoy a better life in the United States. And no matter how much I know they're going to be good Americans, they can be better Americans if they participate politically and make certain their voices are heard so that South Koreans will never give up hope of seeing their relatives, that South Korea will never have to worry about us deserting them with the North, that we can put pressure on China and Russia and all the other countries that refuse to recognize that all people should be free. But most importantly, recognize that right in the United States, we are suffering the pain of our Civil War. It is not over. And many of the great founders of our great country have thought they would have a European country. And instead, we have people from Asia, Africa, South America, and Europe, of course. And we have not really organized to make certain that all of us can do the best we can for united America. So it's very important for young Americans, especially young South Americans, to recognize this is not a European country, it's your country, but we're gonna have to struggle. And as the late John Lewis had said, struggle politically, do what is morally right. If you see something wrong, make some trouble, get involved and participate. And so the so-called police action, which we know is a war, is not over. And we have this all over the country. Let's do our part during our lifetime to say that we contributed toward peace and the fantastic recovery that South Korea has made after the country was flattened out, was just smoke and ashes, is something that falls short of being a miracle. So let that miracle be in our heart Let that inspiration reach all of us, and let us continue to look for a united Korea and a real United States, and let's do it together. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, my co-host, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this great commemorative service.
So here I am traveling, and I am so proud and happy to say, I know there are so many of my grandpas here, all the way from even Australia. Grandpa Brian I saw is on. So as you can see in this map, I've been everywhere. And the funny thing is, everyone asks me why. But before I do, I want to show a short video to see if all of you or any of you recognize where this is.
Really happy, and he's hoping that South Korea stays.
If you do, write in the chat.
Başarılar dilerim. Kore'ye gittiğim zaman Kore gençleri, yeni gençleri eskilere göre daha uzun boyluydular. Daha gelişmiştiler. Çok temiz, çok hürmetkar, çok saygılıydılar.
When he went back to Korea, he realized the kids these days are taller and bigger.
Don't cry.
I think someone wrote Turkey. Is that Turkey?
Yay, that was Turkey. Yeah. So I found myself sleepless. As you can see, I'm very tired there because I was in most countries for 3 days, probably maybe 4. I would land and meet a veteran, and next day go to a memorial, and then the next day I would hop on the plane to go to the next place. And so when I arrive, many people ask, why are you here and how are you here? And that's the story that I want to tell. Well, so back in 2008, okay, right around this time, I had this vision, and I said, you know what? I went to the Korean War Veterans Memorial, just like I did today morning. I went to, because it's the anniversary of the Korean War, and I felt so ashamed and embarrassed that I didn't know much about this war. And I remember standing there looking at the 19 statues, which, you know, in reflection to the wall, it makes up 38, denoting the 38th parallel. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, both as a Korean and American, I didn't know that more than 40,000, almost 40,000 died all around the world, including 36,000 in America. And so I did not know when and how this war could end, but I knew in my 24-year-old young mind that I could do something about it, and that was to maybe help other people remember. So I wrote down 3 goals, and one was to lobby a bill to make July 27th, the National Korean War Veterans Armistice Day, because I thought the best recognition was if it was official by the United States government. And 2 was to organize an event every year so that young people could attend. And 3 was to document the stories of the veterans. So I lobbied my hero, Congressman Charles Rangel, a decorated Korean War veteran who has a Purple Heart and a bronze medal. So I knew that he would care. So I lobbied him actually to pass this bill. And in 2009, President Obama signed it. And I remember George Henry at the time, the chief of staff at the time, asked me to come and work for Mr. Rangel. So I did, and I was able to host an event every year. So this year is my 14th year. And so when Mr. Rangel decided that he was going to retire, I said, okay, well, then I need to make good on my own promise and go around the world to collect the stories of the veterans. And so I did. And this was my itinerary. And here there's Turkey in March. But as you can see, I had a very tight schedule. And that's my that was my route, and I started with Canada, and I was so surprised that Canadians gave me so much love, and I don't know why my slide keeps okay, but I want to tell you a story in Colombia. So right here, I hope it doesn't move. There was a veteran that I met in Colombia that got shot in the face when he was only 16 years old. And you would think that because he came back and had more than 20 reconstructive surgeries on his face, but you would think that he would have, you know, resentment, bitterness in his heart about fighting in Korea. But he actually had nightmares, he said, because he couldn't stop thinking about his fallen comrades. And so later, after he retired and was able to earn enough money, he, out of his own pocket, built a plaque that honored the 100 Colombians who died in the Korean War. And it was so interesting in Colombia how, look at the Korean War memorial there. It looks like the ship, right? And next is, I went to Europe, and in Sweden, I met a 102-year-old nurse who actually visited a leprosy colony during her weekend pastimes. And this is Belgium and Luxembourg. I didn't know that there were so many Korean adoptees in Luxembourg. And I want to stop right here because in Italy, I was able to interview the last remaining Korean War veteran in the entire country. He was a medic. And I was so honored because, you know, we're doing a little pinky promise, is he gave me the original copy of his diary from the war. And I said, oh my God, I can't take this. You have to actually donate it to the Red Cross or, you know, your own government. And he actually said he wanted me to keep it because he thought that I could be the guardian of his story. Which to me, to this day, I take it very seriously. And it's so fun because, as you can see in different countries, like in Greece, many of the countries, their architecture of the Korean War veteran memorial really reflects their country and their culture, just like in Greece. And you saw Turkey, and this was in South Africa. So in South Africa, I'm sorry, it's so distracting how this is playing by having a life of its own. But in South Africa, the veteran, he was held in captive for 23 years. Oops, sorry. I think this is going to be better. I'm so sorry, you guys, because yes, I can control it. And he was held captive for 33 years, and his hands were still frostbitten. I know Mr. Rangel still has frostbitten feet from the war as well. And he too had absolutely no resentment. In fact, there's that picture where I was kissing his hand, and I said, you know, I'm so sorry to hear that, and I know I can't, you know, take away your pain, but maybe you can feel, you know, comfort and solace knowing that your pain led to something. And I am so sorry to say he passed away since, as did many of the veterans that I have met, and I'm showing in this slide. And in Ethiopia, it was so it was so interesting, you know, this grandpa, he was also wearing, that's a traditional Korean War, Korean hat that I don't even know how he got. But what I want to say is, when I visited their homes, these veterans had little trinkets from the war, the trinkets from Korea, and they all told me that Korea was their second home. And even when I went to India, you know, not a lot of people know that India even participated in the Korean War, and they were not only medics, but they were paratroopers. So here's Thailand. Thai people really remembered the orphans. So it was the only country where I traveled where the memorial had a little kid like that. And the Philippines. No, this was not during COVID, but the veteran that I found was actually in the hospital, and I went to go visit him then. And he is 97 years young, and actually his last name is Young, so maybe he is definitely living up to his name. And I am so happy because Grandpa Brian, who is on this Zoom right now, is on this in here as well when I went to Melbourne and Sydney and Canberra, but he was here. And, you know, I was so moved because Grandpa Brian Edwards, he also, he flew from a different region in Australia to see me, but many of the veterans actually also took time, like very far, 2-3 hours to come and see me as well. So in New Zealand, you know, I received, you know, they wrote handwritten notes to me and they thanked me for coming to thank them and remembering them. And when I arrived in Seoul, it was my honor to also meet the perhaps most famous general in Korea who also passed away, General Baek Son-yeop. He was a hero in the Korean War. And later I got to visit 30 countries in Korea as well. And, you know, I would just hold hands with the 할아버지s, the grandpas, and, you know, they reminded me, quite frankly, of my own grandfather, whom, you know, I saw when my parents immigrated from Korea when I was 6 years old. And so I tell many people, in a way, like this, when I went to Suriname, in a way, when I'm with these veterans, whom I proudly call grandpas, you know, I become that 6-year-old girl because I was separated from my own grandfather at the time. When I was 6, and they remind me of that love. I want to share a different story that I'm pretty sure no one has ever told, and it's about Japanese soldiers who fought in the Korean War. And as we all know, Japan and South Korea, we have a very, very, very complex relationship. But after World War II, Japan, you know, they signed in the constitution that they will not be involved in any war. So they couldn't publicly divulge the fact that they sent sailors actually to carry cargo to Korea. And I found one who survived, and he told me that more than 50 died in the ship, yet nobody, the government couldn't say anything, and nobody was able to honor them. So to this day in Japan, the soldiers who fought in the Korean War are unknown, and I mean, they're not even forgotten because nobody knows about them. And I was able to find him, and I said, you know, I know we have a very, very intricate relationship, but I thank you for your sacrifice as well. And I want to show you all. So I'm going to pause right there because I did all around the world, and not in 90 days, but in, I don't know, very couple minutes. And I know that was a lot of information, but I figured, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and sometimes just seeing these veterans or these memorials for you, maybe vicariously can experience what I experienced. But, you know, I came back from around the world, and I have to be honest, when I went around the world, it was, I think, more out of duty, you know, because I made that pledge 10 years ago that I would go. But it's kind of like falling in love. I just fell in love with the veterans. And when I came back, I met with Colonel Weber. And I remember, you know, the wall of remembrance was actually, so Colonel Weber and Mr. Rangel, they are the two major contributors to building, the adding of the wall of remembrance at the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C., because Colonel Weber pretty much dedicated his entire life to building the Korean War Memorial. And Mr. Rangel sponsored the bill that gave permission to build that wall. And we were able to raise enough funds now, but when I met Colonel Weber, he was telling me that while the bill passed, we didn't have enough funds. So I remember it was August in 2007. I was really tired, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to, you know, start working again. I can't be jobless and homeless and traveling. But I just knew immediately. I said, oh, I got to do it one more time. I got to go around the country. I got to raise awareness. I got to raise funds. You know, one thing I learned when I went around the world, the veterans, they gave, not only 2 years, they gave literally their arms and their legs, their face got shot. And I said, I cannot, what's a couple more months out of my life, right? So I did. And you know what? Let me play this and let that speak for you. So this is all America. And I think many of the veterans here will recognize themselves here and the memorials that they built all around the country. Every single state suffered a casualty in the Korean War. And that's the thing. I want to also share stories of that I was able to uncover that I would have never known that, I visited 4 Indian reservations. At the time during the Korean War, Native Americans weren't even citizens of the United States. And, even now they're very invisible from our communities, yet they volunteered. They were not drafted, but they volunteered and went and they died. Puerto Ricans, they were discriminated against in the 1950s. Yet Puerto Ricans actually are the only unit that earned the Congressional Gold Medal, which Mr. Rangel also sponsored. And last but not least, I went as far as American Samoa. And there's one thing I want to tell you about American Samoa. American Samoa is not only really far, because it took me four days to just even get there. I met this one remaining Korean War veteran there, and the ladies that I'm with, they were crying for their uncle that they never met, but they just heard about. And this flower that they laid, that was $300. I know because I went to go pick up the flower with them. That's a lot of money in American Samoa. Okay, but they spent that much money because it meant that much to see me come and honor their uncle. And I want to show this, Hawaii, because this too is a story that not a lot of people know about. In Hawaii, we have a lot of Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans, and I think many of us on this call know about the internment camps during World War II. So many of the Japanese Americans and Chinese Americans in Hawaii, to also prove their patriotism, they also enlisted. They were not drafted, they enlisted. And they, many did not return home. And you remember when not in 2018, we were able to bring 55 remains were repatriated from North Korea. God is great, and timing was impeccable, because when I went to Honolulu, Pearl Harbor, I was actually there and I got to see some of the remains. And these remains are not those remains, they were in the back and I got to see them too. But, it's one thing when you go to a memorial and see the numbers of those who died. It's another to see the names of those who died. And forever your life will change if you see the remains of those who died. And I guess that's why I keep continuing my mission. And the thing is, everyone, a lot of people ask me, why in the world did I go to the other side as well? Because I went to Russia. And I was so scared because I just did not know, I didn't know how to speak the language, but I didn't know what the reaction would be. But I remember this Russian veteran telling me that he fought alongside Americans during World War II. And less than 5 years later, he was told to shoot at Americans. You know, it's not really the choice of the soldiers whom to fight, really, right? And so when I went to China, same thing. I mean, I was able to meet a Chinese veteran, but he's actually ethnic Korean. He heard that South Korea invaded, America invaded North Korea. So he was just fighting to protect his homeland. And this Chinese, People's Volunteer Army, she also married a Korean War veteran, but she was so surprised that I went to visit her and listen to her story. And, I think it's just like everything in life. It's the perspective comes from where you're standing, and maybe not all, because there are definitely things that are right and wrong, but, war and peace, it's very difficult. And so I went to North Korea as well. And a lot of people say, why did I go? But it's kind of like this. It is the missing puzzle. I mean, I can say that I want to, learn about the Korean War and promote peace, but I just needed to see for myself what at least, North Korea or North Koreans thought about the Korean War. So just to make a little, lighter, I thought you'd be interested in their food and their metro right here. And heck, at this hotel that I stayed, I mean, they had a really nice pool. I mean, I was not swimming, but I definitely went to the gym every night. And so here's this woman looking at me because she just could not believe that a woman was lifting weights. But I went there, not necessarily to work out, but I wanted to actually talk to the woman and ask her as much as it was allowed, just about normal life in North Korea. And me being me, I spotted this lighter. It said 727, and I actually tried to bring it without much thought. And then of course it was confiscated at the airport. But in a serious note, this is North Korea. And it was not part of my itinerary. I was passing by and I saw 1950 and 1953. In fact, I don't think there's a lot of people in this world who visited this place because it was recently built when I got there. And what I learned that it was a cemetery for North Korean heroes in the Korean War. And here's me, I was just there and my heart was aching because, it's true. We're all just one people, Koreans, North Korea and South Korea. And this girl right there who's staring at me, I mean, quite frankly, she and I could look nothing alike, right? But she and I were the same age. And so I often think of her. I'm like, wow, if the veterans didn't fight for our freedom, would I be just like her, wearing, hanbok like she is right now and living in North Korea? I think about that a lot. And, which is why I am even more grateful to the veterans. And so I always say, the best reminder why we need to hope and fight for peace is to reflect on the sacrifices that were made on our behalf. And so maybe it's that onus is on us, to carry and finish the legacy of the veterans and ensure there's lasting peace on the entire Korean Peninsula. And I want to tell you a story. And it happened in North Korea. So this picture right here, they're like looking in the ground. I mean, you would think there was an international disaster that was going to happen, because I actually wear I'm going to show you guys. So I wear right here. So I wear a bracelet like this, and it's a cross. So right when I was at that cemetery, I was trying to take a picture and I lifted my hands like this and I felt my bracelet slip. And when I looked down, everything, I had my bracelet, but the pendant, the cross pendant was missing. And I was terrified because I was warned not to leave, not even toilet paper behind North Korea. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a cross. And the funny thing is, I traveled around the world and never came off. And right that moment, it was gone, it was missing. And that's why for 30 minutes, it was getting dark. The North Koreans were looking for that cross pendant. And later I said, you know what? It's okay. Because I felt like a piece of me or a piece of my heart or my faith for humanity or hope for peace, was just left behind in North Korea. They said you couldn't leave anything behind, but I still, to this day, I feel like there was, my heart was left there, and that is why I, almost after 14 years, I keep saying, everybody, what can we do to remember that? Because it's not only me that cannot just, cross over, but because we're still separated, there are 10 million Korean divided family members. We still have MIA POW remains that we need to identify and bring home, because I've met daughters, and sisters of POW MIAs after 71 years, they're still crying. They're still crying. They still want to just know what happened to their father or their brother. And me, I guess even now, I don't know when and how that peninsula could have everlasting peace. But all I know is that I can go around and ask people, let's remember at least what happened, and let's remember what it cost, that you want to share this with as many as people as possible. And every day I cry, I said, God, how blessed am I that I have received this much love from so many people around the world who called me there and kissed and embraced me as their granddaughter, and the angels that helped me. Because you know what? I could not do this by myself. And many CKA members are here, and many of you who are here, you housed me, you fed me, you picked me up from the airport, you're all my angels. And I wanted to just say thank you, because I couldn't do it again, do it alone. And I just wanted to share this love, overwhelming love with other people, and hopefully by compelling them. So we're launching a photo contest, a photo, essay, and video contest. And I'm just hoping that people out there would, photos and videos are very accessible. People post everything on social media. It's very easy. So, submit a photo or a video, interview a veteran, visit a memorial, and just reflect on what the significance of the Korean War is. And I think that's the best way to not only honor our veterans, but also ultimately hope for and promote peace, everlasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. So thank you everyone for being here and listening to my story and being part of this mission that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and a special welcome to Congressman Rangel and Tom Stevens, my old boss. Great Americans, all you are. And it's an honor and privilege to be with you tonight to speak to you about the Wall of Remembrance. I first of all want to thank all of you who have contributed to this special project. It's going to add so much, not only to the the Korean War Veterans Memorial, but it's going to add so much to the 4 million people who annually visit the Korean War Veterans Memorial every year. To have the names of the fallen on the wall where the family members can come and to see their loved ones' names and to etch it, is finally some type of closure for these families. Even the one thing that we are very proud of is, I'm sure you're all familiar with the words Katusa. The Katusas fought with the United States Army in Korea And the bonds between the fellow Army soldiers, US Army and the Catoosa's was immeasurable. They loved each other. They called each other their brother. And they were assigned right in the Army units, the US Army units, and they fought together. But they lost their lives together. Of course, we're going to have the 36,596 American lives who lost their lives in the Korean War on the wall. But this will be the first memorial in the United States, national memorial, that will have a foreign country's fallen side by side with the American soldiers. In battle, they were fought side by side, and on the wall, they're going to be on side by side. And it's a fitting tribute to have the South Korean Catoosa's on the wall with the American fallen. This, we've started construction on the wall. We have enough money to build the wall according to the National Park Service. And we are very grateful, not only to American participation, but especially to the Korean people for filling in the void, a vast void of getting the money to build this memorial. And thank you to President Moon. He was instrumental in getting this started and seeing it through to the end. For that, we are very thankful. We started construction in March, and it's going very well. In fact, we're 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Our plan for completion of the memorial will be on July 27th, 2022, and we will have a very appropriate and nice ceremony to dedicate that memorial. I'm even now working with the Korean government to have families of the fallen from Korea that they're going to bring back to Washington, D.C. for this memorial dedication. It's going to be very special, and we'll have it shown all around the world. And because we want to make sure that they don't say this is a forgotten war anymore. What this is forgotten victory. This, what our soldiers and the Koreans and the Allied nations did was to stop communism in their tracks. Everybody said it was a stalemate. It was not. It was a victory. Why is it a victory? Well, look at two countries today. Look at the country of Korea, 9th leading economy in the world. Now they're going out to different countries, Africa, Middle East, providing aid and assistance to the unfortunate. They are, and after this, in all my life, all the wars that the United States have fought in, World War II, against when we helped liberate people with the Marshall Plan and help Japan get back on their feet and so forth. After the Korean War, the Korean people literally built the nation of South Korea, the Republic of Korea, back from nothing. It was rubble. And there's no other country in 71 years that continually thanks and honors our Korean War veterans other than the Republic of Korea. For that, the veterans are very grateful. They love the Korean people because this goes in part that they were forgotten, not by the South Koreans, they weren't. Even 71 years afterwards, the South Koreans make it a very special duty and honor to thank our Korean War veterans, which we are very grateful. And I will say this, and some may disagree with me, South Korea is the strongest alliance that the United States has. We need to maintain that alliance for many reasons. Now, just to add on, I know I got off my pedestal there, off my sermon, but I just want to say this, that we're doing a lot more things to the Korean War Veterans Memorial. We're adding all new trees. The other trees that were there, we had to take down because some of them started to rot. All new field of service is being replenished with different plants. We're going to have handicapped sidewalks, well, two new sidewalks, one going to Independence Avenue, one going to Ash Road. We were going to have applications where students can come when they come to Washington, D.C. and their summer trips or their spring trips, their high school trips. Basically, all they do is go to the memorial, look around, take a picture. We want them to learn about the memorial. We want them to learn about the Korean War. So we're developing education materials and an app. We're going to have on this app, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'll just give you a little instance. We're going to have, when they click on the app, you're going to have Sergeant Smith come out and say, hi, I'm Sergeant Smith. I was a sergeant in the field artillery in the Korean War. And I just want to welcome you to the Korean War Veterans Memorial. And he'll start talking about what's there at the memorial and so forth. Then he'll start talking about, hey, I want to introduce you to a very good friend of mine. We served together. I consider my brother. And out of the field of service behind one of the statues comes Sergeant Shin, a Katusa. They served together in the Korean War. And they talk about how Korea, before the war was established, and what took place. And even after the war, how the Korean people bonded together. They formed this miracle. And they'll just end up at the Vietnam Veterans, the Korean War Veterans Memorial Wall of Names. And they'll say, hey, Sergeant Shin will say to Sergeant Smith, we fought together in the Korean War, and we were best buddies. We fought together side by side, and look, there's your name and there's my name side by side on this wall for forever. And we want nobody to forget our Korean War veterans, the service and sacrifice that they provided during this critical time in world history. So if you have further questions, feel free to contact me, talk to Hannah, she'll get you in touch with me. Like I say, we're scheduled to finish, have the dedication ceremony on July 27th, 2022. We want everybody to come. It's going to be a very special time, 3 days or so forth here in Washington, D.C., because it'll be time of reunions, get together with Katusa buddies, and meet the different family members also. No longer the forgotten war. That's it.
Okay. This is a very moving experience for me. And I think the fact that what Hannah's done is touch bases with the democratic countries who, like many American soldiers, never heard of Korea, but they went there for justice, equality, and democracy. So Hannah, in a sense, is woven what the International United Nations is all about, except instead of words, she brought it out with her heart. I think it's up to us to not to let the old timers like me down as we pass the baton, to make certain that hope will always be there for the South Korean unification, and that we can make certain that what happened in South Korea should never have happened. Nobody should have the power to divide a historic nation. That's the past. Let's make certain that it doesn't happen again. Hannah, you did a fantastic job. I was hoping that Colonel Weber would come on, but all of you that made this documentary possible, I think is historic. And I'm glad I was able to change my schedule to witness it in its entirety. God bless all of you.